The large intestine is approximately 5 feet long, a little bit less than that. It is called the large intestine because its diameter is larger than the small intestine. It is divided into several regions. The first part of the large intestine is called the cecum, and the ileocecal valve separates the cecum from the ileum or distal portion of the small intestine. That valve regulates the movement of the contents of the ileum into the cecum and prevents it from going backwards. Suspended off of the cecum is the appendix, about the size of your small finger, your pinky. It is lymphoid tissue and part of your malt. Moving away from the cecum, you have the colon. Several subdivisions in the colon exist. Let's follow these. The colon frames the small intestine, and the first portion of it is called the ascending colon. It moves up the right side of your abdominal cavity. It's called ascending because you're following the movement of the feces. There is a 90-degree angle when the ascending colon feeds into the transverse colon, which goes across the abdominal cavity. That 90-degree angle between the ascending colon and transverse colon is called the right colic flexure. When the transverse colon feeds into the descending colon, there is another 90-degree angle called the left colic flexure. The descending colon then moves into the sigmoid colon. From the sigmoid colon, you go into the rectum, and the rectum then feeds into the anal canal, with the opening called the anus. Let's look at some of the functions of the large intestine. Remember that most of the water, 95% of the water, is reabsorbed in the small intestine. However, of the remaining 5%, the large intestine will absorb most of that water, leaving only enough to provide some moisture for the feces. In addition to the water, you're also going to be absorbing electrolytes. The large intestine also stores and eliminates the feces. Bacteria within the large intestine, the bacterial flora, produce or synthesize B-complex vitamins and some K vitamins. Remember, K vitamins are used by the liver to produce clotting factors. What you don't have the enzymes to break down, bacteria within the large intestine can break those down or begin to ferment them. The outcome of this is the production of fatty acids, which can be a form of fuel. And in the process, gas is produced, and that's your flatus. There are some differences between the large intestine and the small intestine. The large intestine has epiploic appendages extending from the colon. These appendages are fat-filled pouches of the visceral peritoneum, and their function is unknown. The muscularis externa has been modified into 3 longitudinal bands, and these bands are called the tinea coli. This term actually comes from the name of a tapeworm. The tinea coli pull the colon into pouches, and each of these pouches is called a haustrum. Haustra is plural for haustrum. There are no circular folds or villi within the large intestine. Remember, most of the absorption of water occurs within the small intestine, as well as the absorption of nutrients. Only the vitamins produced by the bacteria within the colon will be absorbed in the colon, along with some water and electrolytes. Crypts are present here. In the rectum are rectal valves. These are transverse ridges that stop feces from being passed with gas. Within the anal canal, there are 2 sphincters. The internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle, and the external anal sphincter, which is skeletal muscle. These will be involved in defecation. Longitudinal ridges called anal columns are present, and these are anal columns of the mucosa. In between the anal columns, you have anal sinuses that release mucus to help lubricate as the feces goes through the anal canal. The opening is called the anus. The cecum, appendix, and rectum are retroperitoneal. Remember, this term means that they are located outside of the peritoneal cavity. The colon is retroperitoneal except for the transverse and sigmoid sections. This illustration depicts the junction between the rectum and the anal canal. Within the large intestine, you are going to have simple columnar epithelium. However, once you get into the anal canal, the epithelium becomes stratified for additional protection.